Okay, let's see.
Yep, recording. Good.
Is it recording?
It says
okay.
Recording.
All right. All right. Good evening, everyone. Rabbi, I'll let you start.
Thank you, everybody, for coming. I hope everybody had a meaningful Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur. I have to say that, and I said this in our shir this morning, that I'm absolutely gratified and floored by all the people who have taken the time to text and email and call and stop by and just recognize how much work went into making our Rosh Hashanah a possibility, because it was a feat of engineering, among other things. And really all the credit goes to Alicia and to our team who did an outstanding job. So we're just trying to, in this different situation, make it as meaningful as possible for everyone. And when Erica said, we have to learn together, I said, of course. We came up with this idea to learn during Aseret Yemei Teshuva, because what better way to get ready for Yom Kippur and the big day, as it were, than to learn with our favorite teacher, with Erica. So Erica, thank you for taking the time. We miss you. We can't wait till you come back. We really do. And I also just wanted to, on behalf of the shul, to extend our condolences to your husband on his recent loss. His father passed away. So again, the Shema should have an aliyah, and we should only celebrate Simcha. So again, take it away, Erica. Thank you.
Amen. I cannot tell you the absolute joy it is to see you. It's just such a joy. I can hang up now, but I'm not going to hang up now, because I actually was bothering Rabbi Klibanoff every week. I'm like, when are we going to learn together? When are we going to learn together? Because I really miss being with you. And Jeremy and I are looking forward to spending time with you. It was actually the shloshim for his father just yesterday. Rosh Hashanah cut that a little bit, but it's been a strange time. I know many of you have also experienced loss. And I'm with you in that, even though we're virtually distant. There's nothing distant heart to heart. So what I want to talk about tonight is a radical reframing of mistake making. And that doesn't mean that your mistakes aren't real mistakes. But if you want to go there, you can hang up now and just keep that notion. But really, the idea of not being afraid of mistakes, and in some degree, almost loving one's mistakes. So I had a particular privilege 2 years ago to do some teaching in San Francisco, and I got to go to someone else's class, and it happened that he is a therapist who did his dissertation on improv, and that is a winning combination for some and totally scary for other people, right? Someone who does improv as therapy, and you have to do like all this acting. And I was like, all right, I'm up for this. And so part of the exercise to show how much you loved making mistakes was to say a mistake, not an earth-shattering mistake, but like a gesunte mistake, right? You messed up someone, you messed up your schedule, you double booked, you hurt someone's feelings, and you kind of went into the circle, you said your name, and you said your mistake, and you took a bow, and everyone clapped for you wildly. And I was like, this is just weird, right? But I did it just like everybody else did it. And, one person got up and he said, I thought she was picking up the kids. And she thought I was picking up the kids. School is an hour away. And then people went wild and they were clapping. It's amazing. And I have to say, psychologically, it was very interesting. Instead of feeling that I was like really pounding on myself for the error that I had talked about, I actually allowed myself to hear people clapping and what that meant. And then we did the walk of mistakes. You walk with another person, you say a mistake, and the other person says a mistake. You say a mistake, the other person says a mistake, and you just keep walking, meaning you're just listing those mistakes and there's no judgment. And you'll say, what is this getting? Has anyone done anything similar to this? Or does just the thought of this make you have hives? Yes. I would actually pay money to see Rabbi Klibanoff do this. I think it would be a great fundraiser for the shul. You have done it, Racheli? Will you unmute yourself, girlfriend, and you tell us all about it?
No. I was saying same. Like I want to see him. Yeah, we want to.
You want to see a fundraiser? Okay. You know what? We're gonna put in the chat how much everyone is willing to throw in to see. It's like a dunk tank. It's like a dunk tank. But actually, what the exercise did, which was very important, and it totally reframed the way that I've been thinking about mistakes, is the capacity to tell your mistake made it normative. It was okay to be vulnerable. It was okay for me to say it and you to say it, because we're flawed and we fail, and that's what happens. And I think actually one of the things that's so hard is that we don't teach children the audacity and the capacity for failure. We're always pushing them with expectations, or when they don't do something well, we're stroking them and stroking them. We're not actually saying, let's just put the thing you did wrong on the table. Let's have a look at it and let's analyze it. And that's actually something that we get from a particular biblical text that I want to look at with you right now. So we're getting ready to love our mistakes. Okay, so we're going to look at a very tiny etching. I actually had the privilege of seeing this in a museum in Scotland, the Royal Academy in Scotland, and it's very, very tiny. Now, anyone know who this is? You can unmute, please interrupt. I want to pretend that we're actually in the room together, and you don't have to tell Jews to interrupt. So, go.
Aaron, the high priest.
The high priest. Okay.
Aaron.
David, the high priest. How are you? Nice to see you. Who else? Anyone?
Not Moshe Rabbeinu.
There's really no identifying markers here, right? And in fact, this person is kneeling and kind of looks a little Christological, right? It doesn't look really Jewish. And if you're familiar with Rembrandt, you know that this bed actually is used in some of his more erotic etchings. And he had a similar bed to that, which I got to see in Amsterdam last year. So if you go down a little bit further, we might have a clue. What is that? Anyone know what's lying in the foreground there?
Ah, the harp.
The harp. Who's associated with the harp?
David.
Right, David. Thank you, Nancy. So it's David HaMelech, King David. And it's actually, I don't know about you, I have never seen a harp on the floor. A harp on the floor, people don't take a harp and say, I'm just going to lie this harp on the floor. No one does that. And it's interesting how it's the only real indicator that you have. This doesn't look like a person who's royal. There's no ermine cape. There's no crown. There's just a person who looks very simple, very simply dressed, who's kneeling and begging with his hands clasped. Now, we happen to know what this moment is. The artist has hinted at it, but this is the moment after David's sin with Bathsheba, when he's praying intensely for the neshama of that child who will die and never be named. And David basically goes into a whole extensive supplication at that point. He has to live with the consequence of his chait, of the sin that he's done. And there's certain things that are just, they're not normative mistakes. They're not, oh, everybody has failed. They're spectacular failures, and we have to negotiate those also. So what I wanted to look, and that's done in 1652. So David's biggest mistake, and we're not going to do this text in depth, but I want to get a little feel for it, is it begins in the spring, right? In the spring, the time when kings go off to war, David sent Yoav with the king's men. David did not go out to war. Although he was the king, he sent other people. And that's always an indicator when you're not doing your own work, when you have, let's say, a little idle time, that things may go south very quickly. One evening, David got up, he walked around the roof of his palace, he saw a woman bathing, and she was beautiful, and he sent someone out to find out about her, right? So already lots of indications that David HaMelech is not where he should be. He's where he shouldn't be, and he's looking at things that will change his disposition, change his behavior. And the report that he gets back is she's Bathsheba, the daughter of Eliam, the wife, Eshet Uriah Chiti. So she is a wife. She's a daughter and a wife. And then David sent messengers to get her. It's like then and then and then and then one wrong thing leads to one wrong thing. And there are speed bumps everywhere. The minute you say she is the daughter of someone, she is the wife of someone, what that indicates is hands off. She is not for you. She came, he slept with her, she went back home, she conceived, she said she's pregnant, he sends word out to Yoav, and you know the story. He has Uriah killed at war. So as a result of this looking, he now committed one adultery and then murder. And of course, the Gemara has a hard time knowing what to do with the sin of David HaMelech, this author of these amazing Tehillim, this military figure, this hero. In the Gemara, he's someone who studies halakha and is a master of it. And God sent Natan to David. Now, the function of, it'd be wonderful if each of us had our own nubby, our own person who stand like the good Fred and the bad Fred. We had a nubby, and the nubby said, don't do that. Don't read that. Turn off that screen. Zip up your pants. Don't take that. It's not yours. And there needs to be some checks on what we do. And in fact, there are fewer and fewer checks on the way that we behave to prevent us from making mistakes. So anyone want to share with me an effective speed bump for you, or maybe for your friend? Something that you put in place that helps you keep true to who you are, because we don't have a prophet. We don't have our personal prophets. I know there's some speed bumps in Livingston.
I don't have a speed bump, just your conscience.
Okay, your conscience. So, we can say, let your conscience be your guide. But what happens when the conscience is going in one direction, right? The Yetzer Tov and the Yetzer Ra, and they're not exactly aligned, Shelley. What are we doing then?
But I think you know which is the right one.
Okay, so you know which one is the right one, and the trick is doing the right one. So, I don't know if you've ever done 6-word memoirs. They're a lot of fun, and they're also a little irritating because you get jealous of other people who are much more creative than you are. So I'm doing a 6-word memoir, and people are using the 6 words to describe themselves, and feel free to do this before Yom Kippur. And someone says, always do the right thing, do the right thing, always do the right thing, period. Always do the right thing, period. He said, that's my guiding mantra. And you kind of, when you ask yourself, is this the right thing? You always know the answer, and that's the question. Now, Christians have bracelets, WWJD. We have WWMB, or maybe SSK. I don't know, whatever. Anyone else? Mechanisms in place. What is your speed bump to prevent you from making the mistake? You got nothing for me? Nicole, what do you got for me?
Choosing wisely who I surround myself with.
Okay. Who am I going to sit with? I could sit next to someone in shul. I'd love to sit next to anyone in shul right now, but I could sit next to someone in shul who I know loves to gossip. I'm going to get a little delicious morsel there. Or I could say, oh, this person actually really is the serious davener, and I can make that choice, right? Who am I going to go out with? Who am I going to spend time with? When I have a problem with a member of my family, I can call someone to vent who doesn't like that member of my family, or I can call someone who's always the peacemaker in the family. That's a choice. That's a speed bump. One more speed bump. Anyone? And
Rabbi Wein always used to tell us,
yeah,
and it's not mine, Rabbi Wein always taught us as Talmidim that when you think about doing something, if it's right or wrong, ask yourself, would your grandfather approve? And will your grandchildren be proud of you for this?
Love that. That is a guilt sandwich right there. You got both generations really that's the guilt sandwich. I love it. There's, I think we talked about this once when I was in Livingston. We were talking about some, decision-making and the idea of 10-10-10, the Susie Welch, which is when I make this decision, what am I going to feel about it 10 days from now, 10 minutes from now, 10 days from now, 10 years from now? It's some period of 10 months, 10 minutes, 10, all right? There are 3 periods of 10. And, thinking about what the long-term ramifications, am I going to like myself? All right, so you keep thinking that. We're going to go back to our text. And if any of you want to jump in with the speed bumps. So Natan comes, and Natan gives David a talk. And he basically says, you have everything. You're a rich man. And it gives him a mashal. A parable is really, really effective way to teach because it's kind of gentle. You're not really forcing people they don't think, they're not on the defensive. There's an example. And here's the example. There were 2 men in a certain town, one rich and the other poor. The rich man had a lot of sheep. The poor had nothing. He raised it. It grew up with him and his children. It shared his food, drank his cup, and even slept in his arm. And actually, the Hebrew here is so poetic and beautiful, really trying to give you the feeling, this wasn't an ordinary sheep. This was an intimate member of the family. It was like a daughter to him. And a traveler came to the rich man, but the rich man didn't take his own sheep. Instead, he took the ewe lamb that belonged to the poor man and he prepared it for the one who had come to him. And David burned with anger against the man. He said to Natan, because we can always see our own mistakes better when someone else does them. As surely as God lives, the man who did this must die. He must pay for that lamb 4 times over because he did such a thing and he had no pity. And of course, Nathan said to David, Ata ha'ish, you are the man. Now imagine I'm describing to any one of you something that you've done wrong, but you don't know that it's you. And you get angry when you hear this story. And then I turn to you and say, that's you. And of course, David now is shocked. He's gobsmacked, as Englishmen would say, and he has nothing to do. And this is what God says. I anointed you king over Israel. I delivered you from the hands of Shaul. I gave your master's house to you, your master's wives to you. I gave all of Israel and Judah. If this had been too little, I would have given you more. And it was, what more do you need? And I think that's another speed bump, is asking ourselves, why is it that we keep needing more things? If you're not happy with all that you have, how will more things make you happier? And Natan is sent by HaKadosh Baruch Hu to say to David, what's going on here? What is the fundamental assumption, the error that has guided and misguided you? And why do you despise the word of God by doing what's evil? And then HaKadosh Baruch Hu outlines it all. You struck down Uriah. You took his wife. You killed him with the sword. And now the sword will never depart from your house. And it was, you have become a person who will be associated with violence for the rest of your life. And I'm going to bring calamity on you. And I'm going to take your wives. And I'm going to take those who are close to you. You did it in secret. And I'm going to do this thing in broad daylight. And David said to Natan, I have sinned against the Lord. Chatati l'Hashem. So anyone like David's apology here? You liking it? You loving it? You're not liking it? Let's hear. David says, Chatati l'Hashem.
At least he fessed up.
Okay, so he said something, and it's true, he said something, and I'm loving the background. I feel like I want to stand up and say Atikva right now, and I'm just holding myself back. So he there was some confession, but what was there not in that apology?
An apology to the person, Chatati to his fellow man.
Right? Chatati leBathsheba, Chatati leUriah. Chatati, I sinned to my own family. My family had an expectation of me. And who am I going to be at this moment? I think about this often because when we think about poor leadership and the cost of poor leadership and all the consequences of poor leadership. And I've just been learning the Rambam, as I have the habit in the Aseret Yemei Teshuva to learn a parak a day during the Aseret Yemei Teshuva, and very struck in today's parak, all about Machtiyat Rabim, someone who causes other people to sin. And the price that you pay for that, it's not the same thing as ordinary sins. The two of us can walk and we can share, you did this wrong and I did that wrong. And there's some things you say, I can't love this Avera. There's no way I can make peace with this because the consequences are great. But what David says, and I think it's his fatal error, is he thinks I can sin, I can say I sinned against God without saying I sinned against people. I sinned against someone whose life was I used as almost as a pawn. So I want to go back to our story. And think about what David did. And I want to think about Gemara and Yoma. The Gemara in Yoma says, Rabbi Yehuda said, Shmuel said, what did the kingship of the house of Saul not continue on to succeeding generations? And it was Saul didn't continue, but the house of David did continue. It's because there was no flaw in his ancestry. He was impeccable lineage. This is one of the strangest Gemaras on leadership, but it also tells you something about appreciating the role of error. As Rabbi Yochanan said in the name of Rabbi Shimon ben Yehotzadok, one appoints a leader over the community only if he has a box full of creeping animals behind him. Now, I don't know if Rabbi Klibanov has a box of creeping animals behind him, but the idea is he has something inappropriate, sorry, that's a little typo, in his ancestry that preceded him. Why is that? It's so that if he exhibits a haughty attitude towards the community, one can say, turn and look behind you and be reminded of your humble roots. There's no one here who is not at fault. There is no one here who has not failed. There's no one here who is scot-free of sin. And our leaders are just like us in certain ways. Now, of course, the great figures are great in their greatness and unfortunately sometimes great in their error. But the idea of this Gemara is to say, don't trust anyone who says they can lead and they're flawless and there's nothing wrong. They have yichus up the wazoo because life doesn't work that way. And to this point, sometimes we get to a state where we can say, you know what? I don't have a specific mistake in mind, like a huge mistake like David HaMelech. And I'm just sharing with you, and I'm not happy about this, but it gets to the Aseret Yemei Teshuva, and I think, I'm going to write a list, a cheshbon nefesh, of all the things I've done wrong this year. And I can't think beyond the last 24 hours. If I can get to 24 hours, especially with COVID brain, I'm lucky. I think it's really hard to remember all the things that we've done wrong, unless you're a person who journals this and writes this every day, in which case you're probably feeling totally crippled and paralyzed by your mistakes. So Rav Kook actually has a beautiful insight about mistake making, that he divides Averot into two. And he says there are specific Averot, like the David HaMelech mistake. And then there's general Averot. And I want to talk about this general notion of Averot. There's a form of penitence that addresses itself to a particular sin or to many sins. The person confronts his sin face to face. He feels remorseful that he fell into the trap of sin. Slowly, he struggles to come out of it until he's liberated from his sinful enslavement. And he begins to experience holy freedom, which is delightful to his weary self. His healing continues. Rays of a benign sun bearing divine mercy reach out to him, and a feeling of happiness grows within it. And you're going, I don't understand. How did he get from sin to like the rays of a benign sun? How did he make that huge psychic journey? It's not like a person can say, this is the specific thing that I did wrong. There's a general malaise. I feel a general distance from God. I feel distance from my spouse. I feel a distance from my children. And yet being able to name what that is, being able to address it because you label it and say, I feel distant. That begins, according to Rav Kook, the naming of the sin begins the path of tshuva itself. And it happens slowly. You come out of it slowly. It's not as simple as a specific error. It's a general feeling of malaise. I can tell you that I've spoken to many people, and I've suffered this myself during this period of COVID, this time of isolation and almost over introspection, spending too much time with ourselves, and sometimes those we love, but sometimes don't love as much as we need to because we're spending too much time. There's a sense we're going into this Yom Kippur maybe feeling a little bit more angry at the world than we are at ourselves. That the world somehow has let us down, that we need some way to repair and cross this psychic distance. And then we'll begin to feel what Rav Kook calls this holy freedom. So how do we do it? So I'm going to share this and with Rabbi Klibanov has the sources, and so you'll be able to get this at home, is to actually be as specific as you can about a few things. One is the sin of friendship, is thinking just two, not everything, everything doesn't have to come crashing down. But the minute you can say, for the sin of not contacting the friends who I have who are most isolated at this time, and the minute you say it, you understand that it creates some kind of obligation. And that's how you begin to love your wrongdoing. When you name it, you say, naming this problem, this mistake, has helped me alleviate it, has helped me ameliorate it, has helped me do something about it. For the sin as a son or daughter of not doing something for your parents, as a professional, as a leader or a volunteer, it was just give me those two in each category. Or it could be instead of a professional, as a student. And believe me, the averot of students right now is intense, from cheating on tests because we're taking them on screens to putting a photo of yourself and actually being at the mall at the same time. So there's a lot of things that we have to kind of reckon with, but we reckon with them by naming them. And I think that's why the Rambam in Hilchot Teshuva speaks so passionately and provocatively about charata, about naming the things that you do wrong. I want to just share with you, for those of you who want to go perhaps a little bit deeper this season, that Rabbi Zelig Pliskin wrote a wonderful book, Gateway to Self-Knowledge. And if we could only do all of his questions, answer all his questions, how transformed we might be. He has a list of questions about mistake making, and I want to share a few of them with you so that you can reflect this week. Do you tend to make the same mistakes over and over again? What would prevent you from making the same mistakes? What's your usual reaction when you make a mistake? Do you spend a large amount of time berating yourself for your mistakes? And if so, what do you lose out by doing so? When other people point out your mistakes to you, are you usually A, grateful, B, angry at them, C, embarrassed? In what ways do you view mistakes as learning experiences to help you grow? When you make mistakes, do you carefully analyze the reasons for your mistakes? Or do you leave that to your wife? Which 3 mistakes of yours led to very positive outcomes? And it's the last question that interests me the most for this evening, because we're talking about loving your mistakes. I want you to think about a mistake that actually led you to a positive outcome. Anyone want to share one? I don't put anyone on the spot. You made a mistake that led to a positive outcome. Racheli, I feel you have one right there. I'm feeling it. I'm feeling it so close. Just unmute yourself 1 second. No, you're not going to do it. You're going to do it? You're not doing it.
I can't. It was a joke. I said I went to Stern by accident for a year. And then it led me to realize that I need to go there.
Stop laughing. That's funny. Well, I actually really appreciate, number one, that you made yourself vulnerable and you shared. But number 2, that you make a life decision and then you say, I could have just continued on this track. But I actually had a serious conversation with myself about who I am and who I want to be. And is this the right track? I think for many of us, we've been on someone else's treadmill for a really long time. And, you know, we went to high school so that we could get grades, so that we could go to college, so that we could go to graduate school, and then find ourselves midlife saying, I don't even know how I got here. How did I get here? And why am I here? And so I think actually that being able to say, I made a mistake because I made a bad choice that helped me make a much better choice. And that could be in love, right? That can be in professional choices. That could be in recreational time, in the way that we spend it. I mean, there's so many ways in which we say, Baruch Hashem, I made that mistake. Had I not made that mistake, I wouldn't be the person that I am right now. I certainly feel that in so many ways. And I want to encourage all of you, if you can, when you get off of this call, which is going to be really in 1 minute, to put immediately in your phone 1/2 hour, just a half hour, sometime this week. I want you to do it before Shabbos, okay? Because after Shabbos, it's Sunday, you're not going to do it, all right? Is to put 1/2 hour and to answer the questions on this worksheet, right? Do that little al-chet exercise, do the little Rabbi Pliston's questions, and actually just immerse yourself in the mistake making. Because honestly, when we get to Yom Kippur, we're reading somebody else's script. You're going through the siddur and you're going through it this way and this way. In fact, someone told me this week that in her progressive shul, they don't clap. So many people are suffering from different mental health issues that the long list can actually be really deleterious. They actually massage the heart, which I thought was interesting. I'm still clapping. You know, if you have Eastern European parents, you're still clapping. But the fact is, I think for many of us, being able to think that mistakes are actually the learning tools that took us to our self-identities and to deep self-knowledge is really what brings us to Yom Kippur, not in a state of guilt and anguish, but in a state of incredible possibility. And that's really what I wish for all of you this Yom Tov and the year ahead. It's been a hard year. It's been a year where we've been separated from each other, but you've been very, very much in my thoughts. It's been a year where we're dealing with all kinds of mistakes on lots of different levels. And it's up to us. HaKadosh Baruch Hu ends the book of Jonah ends with HaKadosh Baruch Hu asking Jonah a question. How big is the world, your world of compassion? How much will you care about this world? And this is really our job this year. For those of us who are saying, you know, this year the al-chet list is on the world rather than it's on me, is how are we going to emerge? It's not how you fast, it's how you break this fast, who you are the day after the fast, and whether or not you can look at your mistakes and say, these are the tools for my learning and for my becoming, and embrace the possibility that is the newness of 5781. And with that, I want to wish you a Gemar Chatima Tova, a year of incredible health, incredible friendship, of deep community bonds, of deep love with the family, and also deep love of self.
Thank you so much, Erica. Gemara Chasima Tova to you and your family. And thank you, everybody, for joining. I will send out the recording as soon as it's ready, together with these sources. Thanks again for joining.
Thank you. Bye,
Thank
everyone.
you very much. Gemara Chatima Tova.